They said it like a joke at first, a line tossed into the dark, half nervous, half cowardly. This is beyond our pay grade. You remember the way their eyes avoided yours, how their hands trembled not from fear of what they saw, but from the realization that they were not built for it. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of burnt salt and iron. You stood there, surrounded by the wreckage of what you thought was safety, and watched the so-called paw protectors retreat into the fog. Their silver charms jingled like the last coins of a broken faith. They were the demon hunters, the strong ones, the men who were supposed to face the shadows. But they turned their backs, and in that moment, the universe whispered its first honest sentence, "No one is coming." Something inside you broke, but it wasn't weakness. It was the shell that kept you blind. You saw it then, the whole world built on performance. Warriors who prayed for easier wars, kings who feared the noise of their own armies. And you, trained to wait for orders, taught to kneel in gratitude when power ignored you. The betrayal carved something raw into your chest, not just against them, but against the lie that anyone would ever save you. You felt it deeper than grief. It was clarity, and clarity, when it first arrives, feels like death. The night dragged on. Every sound stretched, the flames dimmed to embers, and still no one came back. You realized silence wasn't emptiness. It was a mirror. It showed you every time you hesitated, every apology you made for existing, every time you begged to be chosen instead of building yourself into something unignorable. The hunters had only done what the world always does, abandon those who refuse to see their own weapon. You were never meant to be saved, you were meant to be sharpened. You looked down at your hands, unarmed, trembling, stained, but alive. The weakness they feared was the very thing you could no longer afford, because fear, when faced alone, starts to mutate. It stops begging for mercy and begins asking for strategy. You began to understand the ancient law that no one speaks of anymore. Survival isn't granted by strength, it's earned by silence, observation, precision. The hunters had armor, but you had motive. They had faith, but you had nothing left to lose. And nothing is the sharpest weapon of all. The wind rose. Ashes lifted like black snow. You thought of every time someone walked away when things grew dark, friends, lovers, mentors, and realized their departure was a pattern, not a punishment. The universe clears the room before it speaks to the few who can handle truth. And truth was cruel. You were the demon all along, the one capable of both destruction and salvation. Every shadow they feared in that room was born from your own hesitation. And when they fled, they left you alone with it, to fight it, to become it. That's when the fear turned to fire. Cold, deliberate fire. Not rage, not revenge focus. The kind of focus that watches, waits, and builds empires from ashes. The kind that makes the weak call you ruthless because they don't understand discipline. The kind that makes silence louder than any scream. You didn't chase them. You didn't curse them. You just stood there breathing, letting the dark accept you as one of its own. The hunters had rules. You had necessity. When dawn arrived, you were still there, alone, unarmed, and awake in a way that no light could soften. Their words echoed faintly, beyond our pay grade. But now they sounded different. They weren't a retreat. They were a transfer of responsibility. They had handed you the hunt. And in that instant, something ancient stirred behind your eyes. A quiet, merciless vow: comfort kills. Weakness never arrives as a scream. It whispers, it drips through small comforts, through the warmth you once called safety. You think it's rest, but it's rot disguised as peace. It starts with hesitation, skipping one small challenge, then another, until your spirit learns that avoidance feels better than confrontation. And the more you avoid, the softer your edges become. You call it self-care. The world calls it decline. Weakness is the art of dying quietly while convincing yourself you're healing. It doesn't break you suddenly. It drains you until resistance feels unreasonable. You remember when your fire was untamed, when every setback tasted like blood in your mouth and you kept fighting. Then came the first compromise, the easy choice, the unearned praise. Each time you surrendered an inch, something inside you folded. It felt harmless, even justified. But weakness grows through justification. It wears the mask of logic and feeds on your need to be liked. You start adjusting your words, silencing your instincts, performing for applause. Every approval becomes a leash, every comfort a cage. You traded your hunger for belonging, and now you wait for permission to breathe. They tell you weakness is empathy, They lie. True empathy doesn't kneel to manipulation. Weakness is when your compassion becomes currency for others to spend. You keep giving while bleeding, hoping someone will notice the sacrifice. But no one does, because the world only honors strength disguised as kindness. The weak give endlessly and die forgotten. The strong give selectively and are remembered as saviors. You think your goodness will protect you, it won't. The world hunts softness. It rewards masks, not hearts. Every time you hide your power to seem harmless, you confirm your place in the hierarchy, below those who don't. Weakness loves patterns. It teaches you to fear discomfort. It replaces risk with routine. You check the same screens, walk the same paths, repeat the same excuses. Predictability becomes your religion. You wake each day inside a ritual of safety, mistaking repetition for stability. But no predator fears what it can predict. Comfort is the slowest poison ever invented. You sip it daily. You call it peace. Meanwhile, your ambition suffocates under the weight of consistency. The truth, you're not tired. You're unused. Muscles atrophy when ignored. So does courage. Somewhere deep within, you remember a colder version of yourself. A version that didn't beg for validation, that didn't shrink to fit the room. That version is buried under layers of politeness and fear of conflict. You keep saying it's not worth it to avoid the fight, but that's the lie weakness tells to survive. Weakness thrives in your mouth every time you apologize for existing. Every time you stay silent when your instincts scream. Every time you wait for the right time instead of creating it. It's not patience, it's paralysis dressed as strategy. The world won't warn you when your strength starts leaking. It'll applaud your humility, your agreeableness, your so-called balance. They'll praise your kindness while feasting on your compliance. And by the time you notice, you'll be surrounded by smiling assassins disguised as friends. Weakness invites them in. It teaches you to fear loneliness more than betrayal, so you tolerate disrespect as long as you're not alone. But silence doesn't mean safety, it means surrender. Weakness dies only when you stop protecting it, when you stop giving it names like peace, humility, or love, when you see it for what it is, a parasite feeding on your comfort. To kill it, you must starve it, cut off its air supply, step into pain without negotiation, speak when your voice shakes, burn the routine, break your own patterns before someone else builds them into a cage. Weakness doesn't leave gently, it bleeds out screaming. And when it does, you'll finally understand the quiet inside you isn't peace. It's power waiting for you to return to war. They built a world for you, bright, padded, and slow. They called it safety. They fed you comfort in doses so precise you mistook sedation for peace. Every screen, every voice, every friend repeating the same rhythm: stay calm, stay light, stay predictable. You thought you were living freely, but your movements were pre-written, your reactions rehearsed. You were raised in a maze and told it was home. They gave you mirrors, not windows, so you'd never see the walls. That's the mind trap. It doesn't cage you. It convinces you you've already escaped. You sense it when silence feels strange. When you reach for your phone before your thoughts can surface. When your instinct says move, but your comfort says later. That war inside you isn't random. It's engineered. Fear was planted, watered, and branded as caution. You were taught to call obedience wisdom, to call stillness balance, to call surrender acceptance. But in truth, it was all preparation for one thing: compliance. The system doesn't need your strength. It needs your fatigue. It rewards exhaustion disguised as purpose. It wants you to keep smiling as you break. They say loyalty is noble. They never mention it's also the perfect leash. Every friend who mocks your solitude, every mentor who tells you not to change too fast, they're not always enemies. Some are just comfortable prisoners trying to keep you near. Misery loves company, but weakness demands witnesses. You learn to stay quiet, not out of wisdom, but out of fear of losing the crowd. You forgot that silence isn't the absence of noise, it's the presence of power. The loudest voices are often the most fragile, the quiet ones. They're building something under the surface, waiting for the noise to collapse on itself. You can feel the invisible hands shaping your mind, the ads that whisper inadequacy, the teachers that praise obedience, the screens that flash false urgency. They call it society. I call it training. They built your cravings before you could speak. They sold you belonging so you'd never crave freedom. They taught you to chase applause instead of meaning, because meaning can't be bought, but applause can be controlled. You think your opinions are yours. Try disagreeing publicly and feel how fast isolation comes for you. They don't need chains when you police yourself, but the cracks are showing. You've started noticing patterns, the same words, the same tricks, the same fake empathy wrapped around manipulation. You've seen people fold under praise and perish under comfort. You've seen how soft things rot faster than they heal. You've started asking the forbidden question, who benefits if I stay this way? And every answer leads you back to the same place, your own reflection. The enemy isn't out there. It's the version of you that obeys without question. The voice that says, wait, when your instinct screams, run. So, what now? You stop believing them. You stop performing. You sit in silence long enough to hear your real voice crawl back through the static. You begin cutting loyalty with logic, compassion with distance. You study people the way they study prey. You observe without warning, plan without noise, strike without permission. They called you paranoid. They'll call you cold. Let them. You're learning to see in the dark. That's where real freedom hides, in the places polite people refuse to look. And when you walk back into the world they built, they won't recognize you. You'll smile the same, speak less, move slower. But everything behind your eyes will be weaponized. Because now, you know the truth. They never wanted to protect you. They wanted to predict you. And the moment you become unpredictable, the trap dissolves. Silence wins. You stop waiting for rescue the moment you understand no one is coming. That silence after betrayal, it isn't emptiness. It's a battlefield stripped of noise. And in that stillness, something inside you stops pleading and starts calculating. This is where weakness dies. You don't announce the change, you let it bloom in the dark. Every scar becomes a reminder of what happens when you expect mercy. Every bruise turns into instruction. You begin to see the world not as cruel, but as accurate. An ecosystem of predators who smile while sharpening their knives. You were never meant to be saved. You were meant to learn how to hunt. You start with silence. Not the passive kind that hides fear, but the deliberate kind that builds pressure. Every word withheld becomes a blade waiting to be drawn. You let others fill the air with explanations, opinions, excuses. You just listen. They mistake your quiet for weakness. They'll never realize silence is camouflage. They'll never see the calculations moving behind your still eyes. The predator doesn't roar before it strikes. It waits for the breath between heartbeats. You train yourself to live there, between those heartbeats, where control hides. Then comes patience. It's not waiting, it's stalking. You let time become your ally. You let the impatient expose themselves. People show their true form when they think you're gone or uninterested. You watch their patterns unfold like clockwork. You learn how predictable humans really are. You see that desperation moves faster than strength. You learn to move slow, surgical, deliberate. You stop chasing outcomes, you corner them. In the chaos of others, you build stillness so dense it starts to terrify them. Patience becomes a form of intimidation. Unpredictability is your next blade. You break your rhythm. You shift your tone. You vanish for days, then reappear sharper. They can't chart you anymore. They can't prepare for you. You live between patterns like a shadow slipping through light. Unpredictability is the art of psychological disruption. The moment they think they understand you, you invert. Predictable people die young in this game. You learn that the night the hunters turned away. You don't fight monsters by playing fair. You become the variable no one accounted for. That's how you survive in a world built to trap the obvious. Preparation is the unseen ritual. While they sleep, you sharpen. While they post, you study. Every hour alone is ammunition. Every rejection is reconnaissance. You train your mind to function without applause, to endure isolation like a monk and strike like a serpent. You practice self-denial, not to suffer, but to build control. You erase the need for validation, because dependence is just another leash. You strip your instincts to the core until what's left is precision. Others chase momentum. You engineer inevitability. You begin to understand that true power isn't loud. It's the quiet presence that shifts a room without speaking. It's the discipline to hold your fire while others burn their edges in impatience. You're not here to be liked. You're here to become unshakable, to weaponize restraint, to move with the rhythm of storms, unannounced, devastating, and gone. You don't seek revenge anymore, you seek mastery. Because the greatest counterattack isn't destruction, its transformation so complete they no longer recognize the thing they once underestimated. You are no longer prey. You are the quiet before the hunt. Comfort kills, silence wins, weakness bleeds. Pain was never your enemy. It was your initiation. Every betrayal, every silent rejection, every moment they turned their eyes away while you bled. It was not punishment, it was the forge. You thought survival meant escaping pain, but survival was the art of using it. The world doesn't respect comfort. It respects scars that tell stories of those who refuse to die quietly. You learn that agony, when observed without emotion, becomes information. It tells you where you were soft, where your armor cracked, where your faith depended on someone else's mercy. That knowledge isn't cruel, it's currency. The kind traded only by those who've suffered enough to understand that mercy has an expiration date. There was a time you begged for explanations. You wanted to know why they left, why they lied, why you weren't enough to stay for. That phase was weakness disguised as innocence. The truth was never hidden. It was too brutal for you to accept. You were never meant to be rescued. You were meant to burn. And through that burning, every illusion of safety melted away, until all that was left was the metal of your mind, waiting to be shaped by the hammer of pain. You call it trauma, the world calls it cruelty, but those who rise from it call it transformation. Pain, when stripped of meaning, becomes pure energy, neutral, obedient, waiting for command. You command it through discipline. You weaponize it through silence. Every scar on your soul is a rune, a private language between you and the abyss. When you trace them, you don't remember what broke you, you remember what rebuilt you. The mind adapts to pain like steel to flame. It expands, then hardens. You stop flinching at the sound of loss. You stop expecting fairness. You learn that pain is the only truth that never lies. Comfort whispers sweet delusions. Pain speaks the language of reality. You begin to respect it, to anticipate it, to welcome it as the only honest teacher left. It's not about craving suffering. It's about no longer fearing it. Because once pain no longer scares you, control becomes instinct. And that terrifies those who once held power over your emotions. You learn to convert every wound into data. Every failure becomes blueprint. Every heartbreak becomes a map of your own thresholds. You train like a strategist cataloging losses for future wars. You stop asking, why me? And start asking, what now? The difference between victims and predators isn't the absence of pain, it's what they do with it. The victim relives it. The predator rewrites it. You begin to use rejection as reconnaissance, proof of where your energy doesn't belong. You use loneliness as a lab for clarity. You use fear as a compass pointing toward the next battle worth fighting. In the end, you realize the world never took anything from you. It simply revealed who you were without anesthesia. And somewhere in that revelation, you change. You no longer chase peace. You chase precision. You don't beg for closure. You extract lessons. Pain stops being a storm and becomes your climate. You breathe it, move through it, command it. When people see your calm, they mistake it for healing. It's not. It's control. It's knowing that everything they could ever use to break you is already in your hands, reforged into a blade only you can wield. You don't run from the fire anymore. You are the fire. Every betrayal that tried to bury you became coal beneath your steps. Every scar now glows like scripture. And when the world looks for someone to pity, they will never look at you again, because you no longer resemble the wounded. You resemble the weapon that pain built. You move differently now. No announcements, no explanations. The ones who doubted you still think you vanished, but the truth is far worse. You evolve. The noise that used to infect your head has gone silent, replaced by something colder. Calculation. You read faces like maps, eyes like door codes. Every conversation is terrain, every pause a weapon. The air bends before you speak, because you learn to control what others can't even feel, the unseen rhythm of intent. There was a time you begged for understanding, threw your heart into open hands that only wanted warmth, not truth. That version of you died the moment you stopped explaining your worth. Now you let your silence hum like electricity. You don't chase approval anymore, you bait it. You let them talk, reveal themselves, overcommit. You watch the cracks appear in their masks. You record everything, not with devices, but with memory sharper than steel. You no longer move fast, you move precisely, because predators don't rush. They wait for heartbeat timing. You've studied the anatomy of control, the way fear blooms behind confident smiles, the tremor that betrays deceit. You understand that the loudest man in the room is the weakest. He screams to drown his own guilt. You watch him, patient, letting his ego hang itself with its own words. Then, when the moment is right, you strike, not with anger, but with precision so cold it feels surgical. You win not by force, but by inevitability, because by the time they see the truth, it's already over. Power isn't in domination, it's in restraint. You know that now. The greatest control is the ability to do harm and choose not to. That's what separates you from them. The self-appointed hunters, the ones who ran when it got real. They wore armor, you built one under your skin. They carried blades, you became one. Every betrayal hardened you. Every humiliation stripped you down until only truth remained, ugly, beautiful, unbreakable. You learned to starve emotion until it served you. Rage became focus, pain became clarity. You use both like a craftsman uses fire, carefully, purposefully. You can disappear for weeks and return as if summoned by consequence. That terrifies them, because unpredictability is divine in a world addicted to patterns. You no longer react, you calculate. You no longer ask, you decide. Every step is a message written in silence. I'm not what I was. There's a weight in your stillness now. When you enter a room, conversation stumbles. People sense it. The way predators sense movement in tall grass. They feel the absence of need, the quiet authority of someone who doesn't seek, doesn't beg, doesn't prove. That energy is what they fear most. Someone who can't be manipulated by praise or guilt. You became the storm they can't read, the calm that carries threat. You don't announce your revenge. You let it grow roots. You let time sharpen it. You've mastered patience, the most terrifying form of violence, because while others burn in haste, you're already 3 moves ahead, watching their flames run out of oxygen. You are not cruel, you are inevitable. The silence you keep is not peace, it's precision. Now, when they look for mercy, they find a mirror instead, and in that reflection they see what you became, the thing they feared, the thing they created, the one who stopped running. The one who learned that power doesn't shout, it watches, it waits, and when it finally moves, the world holds its breath. The room is quiet now. The walls that once echoed with the chaos of others' noise have fallen still. You can finally hear your own breath, steady, measured, dangerous. This silence isn't peace, it's power. The kind that doesn't beg to be seen or heard. The kind that watches. Before, you mistook silence for emptiness, but now you know it's the weapon that no one suspects. You learned that sound draws predators, silence draws fear. You used to wait for someone to save you. Now you wait for your next move. The hunters walked away, saying it wasn't their fight, and they were right. It never was. You look around and see how everything has changed, or maybe it's just you who has. The same world, the same streets, the same faces, but the illusion has burned off. You see the codes now, the small hesitations in people's eyes, the invisible lines between strength and submission. You see how weakness advertises itself in tone, posture, and timing, how desperation leaks through forced smiles. You used to speak to be understood. Now, every word you say is chosen to wound, to test, to measure. You no longer explain, you no longer plead. You let the silence stretch until they crumble under it. There's a cost, and you've paid it. Sleep comes rarely, and when it does, it feels like exile, not rest. You gave up softness to become sharp. You killed your need for validation because it was the leash that led you into every trap. You started walking through the fire of rejection until it stopped burning. You watched parts of yourself die. The naive, the sentimental, the trusting, and when they did, you didn't bury them. You learned from their remains. You built the version of you that does not beg for mercy, because mercy is what predators give before the kill. People still talk. They say you've changed. They whisper that you've grown distant, colder, hard to read. But that's because you stopped being readable. You stopped performing humanity for comfort's sake. You learned the oldest lesson of war. Invisibility is survival. You don't post, you don't explain, you don't react. You simply move. Every smile hides calculation now. Every pause is a strike held back by precision. They can't tell if you're still human, and you like it that way. Because for the first time, you're not trying to prove you are. You used to want control over outcomes. Now you want control over yourself. That's the highest order of power, sovereignty of the mind. You no longer chase loyalty, you test it. You no longer fear betrayal. You anticipate it. You no longer hate your scars. You study them like maps, every line showing where weakness tried to kill you and failed. Every mark a reminder that pain was your teacher, not your enemy. The hunters may come again, armed with their excuses and their half-measured bravery. But this time they'll find you waiting in the dark, unarmed yet untouchable. The world will keep screaming. Let it. You've learned the art of silence, and in that silence, entire armies crumble. You've learned that true power doesn't shout. It watches, it waits, it decides. So you keep your distance, your discipline, your control. Because the war never ends, it only changes shape. And when it comes again, and it will, you'll smile quietly, because you already know the answer to every question worth asking. Comfort kills, silence wins, weakness bleeds. Which one are you?